time for the processing. So it will not be immediately available for you. Unfortunately, Zoom will not let you guys go and access the recording until I have made it available, but I am going to record this. So make sure it's recording. Okay, it is. All right, so we're going to start talking persuasion. And are you guys seeing the full slide? Or are you seeing the slide with notes right now?
We see the full slide.
Cool beans. Okay, that's what I want you to see. Okay, so we're going to talk persuasion. And remember, we looked at the week 11 assignment together. And that's the debate assignment. And we're going to choose a topic for the persuasive speech here in just a minute. But for right now, I want you guys to think about some things. I want you to think about, what does it mean to persuade? So when we think about choosing a topic for this speech, you're going to want to choose a topic that allows you to challenge your audience to think or act differently. We're going to talk about who our audience is in relationship to our message, because audience analysis is fundamental to building a persuasive argument. And we're going to talk about how we persuade an audience. So look at this for just a second. I'm going to put this rock out of here. Okay, so your upcoming speech is 5 to 7 minutes. Okay, you're going to need 4 sources of research. You'll turn in your outline and works cited page at the time that you present, just like you did with your informative speech. And now if you didn't turn that in, right, you were supposed to. So you're supposed to turn in a final version of your outline and works cited page at the time of the presentation. And you're going to need a presentation aid. Now this time, if you're interested in using media, you can. Your media can be up to 2 minutes in length, but you must have 5 minutes of spoken content. So your speech itself must be at least 5 minutes. Now, I don't mind where you put that media. You can put that media in the middle. You can put it at the beginning. You can put it at the end, as long as you know you have at least 5 minutes of spoken speech content, because I don't want you to replace your speech with someone else's media. Now, when I say media, I'm talking about those videos, right? Those videos that get us online, that make us want to do something. I've seen some great videos that have gone viral that are just so powerfully persuasive that if I was talking about that topic, I think it would be really meaningful to include that video somewhere in there. So feel free to use media however you like. There is an exception to the 2-minute rule. If you're going to show media that you can turn off the volume and talk through, okay? So you're not going to use the media itself, their sound, right? Their audio, you're going to talk through it. You can do that. So if there's a point where you want to show us something important and you just want to, for instance, if you were to show us the devastation in a town that's been hit by a hurricane and you have media footage, you might be talking about that, what we're looking at on the screen, and it may go longer than 2 minutes, as long as they're not doing the speaking. Does that make sense? So that you can be creative in how you use your media. But when you think about your speech topic, make sure it's one that you feel strongly about, at least in part, because that's going to make it a lot easier for you to be persuasive. And when you think 5 to 7 minutes, remember how fast that goes. So try to achieve the goal that you can in 5 to 7 minute speech. All right, so we're going to take a look now at some speech topics, because I want to get you guys thinking about your own topic so you can be prepared to sign up for a speech spot. Now, you might be wondering when we're going to start speaking, and so I will tell you that speeches start not this week, not next week, but the following week on the 9th of November. So some of you will start speaking as soon as the 9th of November, and then we don't have class on the 11th because it's Veterans Day. And then we come back the following Monday, and that's when we'll finish our speeches. So some of you will sign up as soon as the 9th of November. And I'm going to scroll down now. Are you all able to see our Canvas screen? Let me go back to that. I think I took it away. I'm going to go now. If you want to come with me on your end, you can. Do you want to open up the same page in Canvas? Feel free to do that. but I am going to open up our persuasive speech topics list. Now, this is not exhaustive. There are a lot of topics to choose from. You are not required to choose from this list, but you can choose from this list if you want to. If you have another topic that you feel strongly about, feel free to choose whatever topic you'd like. Let's see if I can make this bigger. Can you all see the list on your end? Okay, let me try this again. You should see it now. Did it come up for you? Okay. All right, let's see if we can look at this a little bit larger. Okay, so I'm just going to scroll through. And like I said, you don't have to choose from this list, but this is just giving you some ideas. And if you want to pick up the list on your end, you totally can. I'm not liking how this is doing this. Okay. I mean, there are so many topics to choose from. When you think about persuasion, you could be convincing us that we need to be a better friend or be honest or be creative. You can persuade us that we should fight homelessness or fight cancer. We can be convinced to vote or to register for certain kinds of courses or programs. You can teach us to be proactive and prevent STIs, or you can support the goals of Social Security. You can support legalizing prostitution or fighting pesticide use. If you're against speed limits, fight for it. If you think we should travel to space, tell us about it, right? If you're for universal health care, that's a great topic. Or maybe we should tip better or abolish tipping altogether. I know some students are against fast fashion and sweatshops. Maybe we want to be more diplomatic. I've had students do some great speeches on road rage. I've had some students do some terrible speeches on road rage. So just choose carefully what topic you want to do. But as I said, this list is not exhaustive. There are a lot of topics to choose from that may not be on this list at all. So I hope you find something that interests you and maybe something that you would want to talk about. And it might help to open this on your side too. Of course, there's always those controversial topics that people love, like issues related to pro-choice or pro-life, talking about abortion, right? Or talking about gun control. That's always a great topic, but it goes fast because there's always one person who's really passionate about that. I don't want you guys choosing the same topics, but I have had students say, well, can we be on opposite sides of that topic? And it's totally up to the speaker. Like for instance, I had a boyfriend and girlfriend, a couple, do the gun control debate. And it was really interesting because they were both really good debaters. They were both really good speakers, and they were both really kind to each other. Like they weren't doing it just to compete. They were doing it because they both believed in different sides of that position. So it was an interesting debate. Now, keep in mind, this is somebody's grade. So if you do choose to like, let me go, one side of this position versus another, you want to keep in mind that it is their grade at stake. So you don't want to necessarily create, a debate environment per se. All right, let's see. I saw there was a question in the chat. I'll try to navigate over it. It's so hard to do that from in here. Once I get into sharing the screen, it's really tricky. All right. So the LSSC database, oh, did you have to log into the database to access this list? You shouldn't have to access the list through the database, but if you want to log into the database, it's going to be a single sign-on. So the same sign-on you use to log into Canvas. And I'm going to navigate back over to that because the database is a great place to get different topics. Let me see if I can go back over there. So it's a single sign-on now, so it should just be your Canvas login information. Let's go to, remember I did tell you guys I had the librarian here. So we're just going to go to the library guide. And this is right here in our Canvas shell. So going here, you can see that there's some resources to help. If your single sign-on doesn't work, you'll log in with your borrower ID and so it's your XID and your 6-digit birth date. And then there's that opposing viewpoints. There's a lot of other, are you all seeing the database here? I just want to make sure that navigated to that for you. Is that what you see, Alondra? Okay, cool. All right, so I'm going to click on opposing viewpoints. It should log me in because I'm logged in. If it doesn't, it's not being very helpful. Let's see. Okay, so it does. And this is my favorite database. So it gives you 2 sides of every issue, at least 2 sides, but it'll give you so many more. When you log in, it immediately takes you to some popular topics. You can click browse issues. If not, and it should show you all of the issues. And it's so, so nice because this means that there's more than one viewpoint. If there's more than one viewpoint, it's a great argument. So when we think about persuasion, it's not something that would be fact-based alone, right? It typically has some opportunity for question, whether it's our values, maybe it could be a moral argument, or perhaps, when we think about climate change, for instance, scientists aren't agreeing on it. So it makes it up for debate. But there's a lot of topics that you could choose from here. This is why I didn't want to put this list on the screen because there's so many topics. I didn't want to overwhelm you guys. But it does help to have more if you're struggling to determine what your topic will be on. Any questions? I was just like, memes and viral content. I've never even seen that. All right, so I clicked on that just out of curiosity. And the great thing you can see about opposing viewpoints is that it's got this awesome overview, which is like Google or Wiki, but better because it's trustworthy, right? So you've got this great overview. And within this overview, it goes into depth and detail about that topic. So this would be a great source to cite if I was talking about memes and viral content. And it even gives me a citation. So I just copy and I'll edit that, of course, onto my document so it's formatted correctly, but my citation is already in MLA. And then you can see over here, it's going to give you more like this so you can explore the topic in greater length. And every time you click within the database to go to a new link, it's a totally new article. So you can cite that again. So keep that in mind that every time you go inside the database and click a new link, it's brand new and it's not the same article. So you have a brand new source to cite. Now, the other thing I like about opposing viewpoints, so there's more like this, it gives you lots of stuff to work with. If I type in, let's say I type in, say I wanted to talk about children because I care a lot about kids. If I just start to type it, it gives me all these options. Now, the dark one is going to have that nice overview. So you can see that if that was the topic I went with, it gives me this overview, much like a wiki page. But if I wanted to talk about something else, see, these are all going to have that overview. So if you get comfortable with one of the databases like I have, I think you'll start to really appreciate it. I love opposing viewpoints because it always gives you viewpoints. It will tell you one side of a coin versus another. And I really like that. So if you're someone who likes to look at maybe two different sides of the argument just so you argue it better, this is a good place to start. So that's a few viewpoints to consider. Let's see. Let's go to that prostitution topic, because it's always interesting to me to consider this as a topic. So it's going to tell you issues related to prostitution and crime. It's also going to talk about sex trafficking. It's also going to talk about sex work, decriminalizing it. And it's going to give you some other issues to go along with that. So interesting topics for sure. Let's see, homelessness. And there's that wonderful overview. And what I want you guys to notice too about opposing viewpoints is that on this page, you can access infographics, which are great for visual aids, different viewpoints, videos, images, different types of articles, even audio clips. So it's a really helpful, I think a really helpful and comprehensive database resource. There's other database resources. If you were to navigate back over to Jasmine Simmons, who's our librarian, her page, there's a few other resources here as well. So procon.org, which I know a lot of students like, Room for Debate. Those are both going to be Procon sources. And then within the database, the CQ researcher is pretty helpful. Okay, so if it asks you to log in, it's your XID and it's your birth date. And that should get me, I'm crossing my fingers. Sometimes it doesn't. Oh, I'm in. So if it does ask you to log in, that's how you'll log in. And you can see that CQ researcher has a featured report, just like opposing viewpoints. And it gives you extra insight. Let's try doing it. And it doesn't do what? It doesn't do what opposing viewpoints does, unfortunately, by offering you other topics. That's why I don't love it. All right. So how many of you have a topic in mind? Because if you have a topic in mind, I'm going to have you go ahead and sign up for your speech spot today. If you'd like. Now, if you don't want to sign up for your speech spot because you're not sure what your topic is, which is fine, I will make this available to you so you can sign up. But those of you who know your topic, you can access that link and sign up only if you know your topic. I'm going to repeat that. Only if you know your topic can you sign up. If your topic's still to be decided, you cannot sign up for your speech spot yet. So if you know your topic, you can log in and sign up for your speech spot. If you do not, you have to wait. Any questions? All right, I'm just gonna do a pulse check. You guys still with me? Give me the thumbs up. Treasure, are you still here? I don't think you are. You are here, okay. How about you, Jamie? Are you still in there? In that box, that little box?
I'm here.
Okay, all right. How about you, Bianca? Are you still here? Okay, all right. So thank you for sticking around. That's good. It's good to see you still here, because now I'm going to talk about persuasion just a bit. Now, Madison, is that showing the presenter view on your side, the full slide, or is it showing my notes? Okay. Okay, so you don't need to see my notes, but the notes can be here if you need them. All right, so today I want us to define persuasion, and I want us to consider our audience. I also want you to think about what it takes to persuade your audience. And when we think about persuasion, what is it going to take for you to persuade your audience on your topic? Remember, you got 5 to 7 minutes to do this. So you really want to be intentional about how you do that. Now, when I think about persuasion, it's an art form. It really is. And it's also a skill. So with practice and a little determination, you can be pretty powerfully persuasive. Now, I just got to ask, how many of you consider yourself to be persuasive? Like if you really want something, you can usually get it. If you really want something, you can usually get it. Okay, so maybe you have natural gifts. Has anyone ever told you you can be very persuasive? Or, wow, you're very convincing? Or how about this one? You're very inspiring. I love that, right? That's a warm way to be very persuasive. Now, I don't want you guys to confuse persuasion with manipulation. That's not what we're talking about. Manipulation doesn't really give the audience a choice. That's almost like how propaganda works, right? It puts this idea out there, it uses fear, and it only gives them this either or. It's either this or that kind of choice. When we think about being persuasive, that's not really what we're trying to do. We're allowing the audience to make a choice, and we want that choice to be well informed based on the information we provide, and also based on our commitment to the topic. So we're going to call that our ethos. So today we're going to talk a little bit about what it takes to know who your audience is. I may not be able to get through all of these points that I want to be able to get through with you, but I think that doing the assignment and listening to the Jacobson brand debate can really help put this into perspective for you. When we think about how we persuade, there's a traditional approach, which has been around for centuries. And we're going to go back and we're going to think about a great philosopher's work on the treatise of rhetoric and talk about the appeals to persuasion. And we're going to also talk about how we consider our audience being persuaded, what it takes. And the reason why we know this is because we've been able to identify this scientifically through consumerism. What drives people to make the decisions they make? What drives them to purchase these particular items, or what drives them to be loyal to a brand? So we're going to consider the elaboration likelihood model. It's our modern day understanding of persuasion and the route of persuasion. And we're going to talk a little bit about what motivates us. And when we think about motivations, right, it's because there's something wrong, right? Something's wrong and we want to make it right. And we call that cognitive dissonance. It's this imbalance between thought and action. It's imbalance between what we know to be right and safe and good and just and our behaviors. And so when that imbalance is created, when we identify with that, we want to usually find that harmony or balance again. So we'll talk a little bit about cognitive dissonance and how we have needs and wants that motivate and inspire us. So when we think about persuasion, motivations play a big part in that. And it's up to you as a speaker to be able to identify what motivates and inspires your audience. So you really have got to know who they are. And so when we think about persuasion, let's define it as this, okay? It's the process. And I want you to think of it as a process, because it is. It's a process. It's not something that just happens instantly, though sometimes it can. With given the right kind of information, the right kind of appeal, it can happen instantly. But typically, it takes time, and it's a process. And we want to think of it as changing or reinforcing. When we think reinforcing, if you already agree with me about my topic, it's not going to be hard for me to persuade you, right? You're going to be like, yes. And you see that. We see that when we see debates, or when we see people who are loyal to one candidate or another. I don't know if you've been watching the debates at all, but if someone is already supporting Trump, right, they're going to be like, yeah, go Trump. If they're supporting Biden, we're going to be like, yeah, go Biden, right? So you see that. You see people who support one candidate or another, and ultimately, their attitudes, beliefs, and values are being reinforced, right? If you're not sure where you are between those two candidates, you want to know a little bit more. And these are the things that are going to play on that. It's going to be your attitudes, and this is your general evaluation. Do you like or dislike the candidate? Do you like or dislike the speaker? Do you like or dislike the topic? And that's, pretty general. So you think about Target, for instance. If you like to go to Target, you feel good when you go to Target, you like the brands, you like the merchandise, your attitude is pretty positive. So when you see a Target brand ad, you're going to be pretty positively motivated to listen. They're going to tell me something I didn't know, and I would like to know more because I like them. So attitudes play a big part in how we interact and engage with the world around us. It also plays a part in how we make our decisions. If you like public speaking, then this class, right, is enjoyable to you, at least in part. It's up to me to maintain that as a speaker. So I need to know that you believe in it, right? So you believe in the things that I'm teaching you. If you believe, yes, I believe that I can learn from this teacher, then chances are you're going to probably feel a little bit stronger. So when we think about beliefs, it's that which we hold to be true or false, and to the extent in which we see that. So if you believe in a political ideology, if you believe in the Democrats, right, and what their goals are, you're going to be more in line with their philosophies and maybe supporting that candidate. Values are enduring concepts of right or wrong, good or bad, just, unjust. If you see something as being valuable, you see it as being worthy. If you see something as an absence of that value, right, that's going to be wrong or bad. So if something's not there and you believe strongly in it, you're going to have a problem aligning with it. If I say I value equality and you value equality, then you're going to be in line with my message. If something I'm saying contradicts that, right, that's going to dissuade you, or you're going to be like, you're going to step back. You're not going to feel as certain about me and my beliefs and my values. So when we think about attitudes, it's general evaluations, and we change constantly. Our likes, our dislikes. Today, I love certain types of food, and right now I'm really exploring, foods that I love Asian food. And right now I love Japanese cooking. And so I'm going beyond sushi because I love sushi. I know that, but I'm trying other things because I haven't tried them before. I'll try something different tomorrow, right? And my attitude will change. It'll be in favor of something else. They change constantly. Our attitudes are ever changing. And it's okay to change the attitudes of your audience. Maybe they'll like a certain kind of music or a certain kind of clothing or a certain kind of food one day, and they'll change and like something different the next. But we want to think about trends when we think about attitudes, right? And we have some control over how our audience perceives the attitude or the attitude of our message. And then we have beliefs. And so it can be, the extent of which something's true or false, the goal of the message that I'm sending, or the potential outcome. Now, when we think about values, they're a little harder to reach. They're a little bit further, right? They're a little bit more enduring, and they don't change consistently. If someone values something, they tend to hold on to it very tightly. Now, your values can affect your attitudes and beliefs. Ultimately, though, values are something that you're going to, see at different times in your life. You're going to see that you're more connected with those values. So let's look at this for a minute. This is the Rokeesh Value Survey. When we think about Rokeesh, this was around the 1950s when this was established. It helped marketers market their products. And they wanted to understand, in small part, what motivates their audience, what kind of values their audience held. And so when you see a T next to something, that's a terminal value. That's that's the end goal, right? And then the others are how we're going to get to that goal. So it's a motivation. Now I'm going to ask you guys, of this list, can you identify the most important value to you? The most important value. Identify the most important value the first, and then see if you can identify two more values that are more important than the others. So what's the most important value? How many of you said an exciting life? Exciting life? Anybody that's your most important value on the list? How about a world at peace? Most important value? A world of beauty? Really? I'm surprised that none of the terminal values really stuck out for you. How about being ambitious? How many of you thought that was the most important value? Broad-minded? Capable? Cheerful? Courageous? How about forgiving? Independent? Okay, so there's some people that agree independence is the most important of the values. How about responsible? Okay, so responsible, independent. How about self-controlled?
The responsible and self-controlled, and independent all sort of relate in a sort of way. Like if you have the responsible side, I was sitting here trying to decide between responsible and self-controlled, because when you have one, you generally have the other. And so I don't know, between those two for me.
Okay. So now you put them in like a order of three. What was the third?
Maybe I'd go to one of cheerful, forgiving, or world at peace, I guess. That wouldn't be how I'd word those, but definitely responsible and self-controlled as the first two. Independent is pretty high, but it's not, I don't think it's a massive priority. I guess you could say world at peace. That's so vague though and broad that it could, I don't know. That's probably what I'd do as my third though.
How about your world at peace? Like with the people around you, your home, your work, the life you lead.
And if you put it that way, then yeah, I could put that as my third.
Okay, so definitions are important here, I think, for you all. You want to understand how that plays out in this context. So what I'm trying to help you see is that, generally speaking, we identify with certain values over others. Now, that doesn't mean these values aren't important to identify in your message, but if I was going to say, hi, I have a cheerful audience, I'm assuming you all are in a pretty good mood today, you're going to see that as favorable, but that's not the most important thing, that most important outcome. When we think about those instrumental goals, those goals that help us to get to those terminal goals, right? Ultimately, they're building blocks. And so you think, well, obviously, Ethan's looking at it like, being independent or being self-controlled and responsible is going to help him to achieve his, and we'll say terminal goal that isn't listed there, because if it was listed there, it would have been an easy one for you to highlight. And so kind of putting that into perspective, there are over 155 potential values on the survey that Rokeesh developed. So these are just a few that I highlighted. For me, when I think about it, I think being healthy would be on this list, being healthy and feeling vital. And right now in this situation we're in, I think there's a whole nother list that we could think about too, because I think as we are all sitting here in, I think, quarantine, most of us are changing our lives in a significant way. I think the list changes a little too. All right, so I want you guys to think about topics that are controversial in nature, okay, for a moment. Let's talk about the issue of abortion, for instance. Now, we can see when we look at the degrees of persuasion, right? Some are going to be on one side of the issue or another. And I'm not going to say whether you're for or against it, but let's imagine that each of those lies on a different side of the spectrum here. And I want you to also keep in mind that most people fall on this continuum somewhere for most topics. If I said homelessness, how many of you are strongly opposed to homelessness? Strongly opposed to it. You're strongly opposed to homelessness. Strongly opposed. Right? So we think about this. This is not the kind of topic where you're going to be like, well, I'm strongly in favor of homelessness. Right? That's not going to ever be the outcome there. So no one is ever going to look at you if you're trying to fight homelessness and say, that's a pointless argument. However, how much are they willing to do to be a part of that change or that goal? And that's what you have to consider when you think about the degree of persuasion here. What are you asking them to do? If you're asking them to donate their money, their time, their influence, then you're going to see that they fall on this line somewhere. So it's the action or the outcome. If I'm drinking from my plastic water bottle and you come along and start pulling my water bottles and putting them in the recycling bin, right? I'm going to be like, whoa, wait a second, what are you doing? But that doesn't mean I'm not strongly in favor of recycling. So thinking about that, it's about action. We think about issues like gun control and abortion. Why do you think that there are people that fall maybe more in the middle here? Is it because they don't know enough? Or is it because there are a lot of gray areas to those issues. I think when we think about issues that are more controversial in nature, it's both, right? Maybe someone doesn't have enough information so they don't feel like they can make a well-determined decision. Or maybe it's because there's so much gray. When we think about issues of abortion, for instance, right? But there's these what ifs. Now, not everyone feels that way about that topic. Some of you feel really strongly one way or the other, but a lot of people fall in the middle categories where they're neutral or slightly in favor or slightly opposed based on those gray areas. So when we think about persuasion, you need to know where you stand and what you're trying to get your audience to do. It's really difficult to take someone from being strongly opposed to being strongly in favor, obviously, especially in a 5 to 6 minute speech. If you can take them from strongly opposed to moderately opposed, then you've done something, right? If you can take them from neutral to being slightly in favor, then you've done something. And that's what you want to consider when you are trying to build your message. Don't intend to make an extreme change. You're not going to build your message in a way that's meaningful. And when we think about persuasive skills that go into it, that process, right? It's not going to follow the process as it should. And you've got to have realistic outcomes. All right, so the traditional approach Aristotle held, and then we think about, we go back to ancient Greece for a moment with me. Imagine the philosophers standing out on the streets, challenging people to listen to their message. They really believed that oratory was the way to communicate ideas and to make change. And Aristotle taught that there were 3 means of persuasion. Now, when I say the 3 means of persuasion, this is how you're going to persuade your audience. This isn't how the audience is persuaded. Okay, this is you persuading them. So this is what it's going to take from the speaker to persuade the audience. And he held that those 3 means, ethos, logos, and pathos, all work together in order to achieve a goal. Now, I'm going to ask you guys, I'm going to stop my share for a second. Who knows what logos means? What is logos? Go ahead. Tell me, Lauren, what is logos?
Logos is like when you use facts and logic. Basically, I kind of remember like logos and logic. It's when you use a logical pattern to basically reason with the audience and tell them in a logical manner, not using like as much empathy or pathos and emotion to convict them. Maybe using more like straight facts to convince them.
All right, I'm going to put I put this into the chat. She said logos is logic, it's facts, it's reasoning, and Shannon concurred, logic and reasoning. It's how we develop the message if it makes sense to the audience. Does 1 + 2 = 3, or are you trying to tell me, 1 + 1 + 1 = 3? Are you trying to examine that 2 + 2 = 3? Okay, so how does it add up to me as a listener? Is the logic, are the facts, is it reasonable? Does it make sense to us? Can this argument in and of itself be enough to substantiate the claim? So when you make a claim, right, you're claiming that, you want the audience to agree with this, right? That's also your conclusion. You're backing it up with your premises. Does that make sense to the audience? Do the premises add up? And so when we think about developing our ideas, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that, that's logos. It's how you develop those ideas. Do the facts really present the outcomes? Does it substantiate my argument? Now, what is a fact? I have to ask this. I know it sounds like duh, but what is a fact? If you defined a fact, what would you define it as? What's a fact? What makes something a fact? Now, we can have a false fact. Keep in mind, just because it's a fact doesn't mean it's true. But what makes something a fact?
Well, I was going to say a fact would be something that's true, but then you basically just said that that's not what that is. So I would say, when I think of a fact, I think of something that cannot be changed. So whether maybe it's true or not, I think typically it's presented to be true. And it's something that's not like a matter of opinion. It's like, it is what it is.
Okay. All right. So I see why you were struggling with this. Okay. It can be proven is the word we're looking for. It can be proven, meaning we have the evidence to prove it. So statistics of a study, it can be proven. Now we can also find that the statistics weren't right? So they weren't accurate. We can find that though, because we can go back and we can review the statistics. So that's why I mean it can be false. So Shannon mentioned statistics of a study. Now I could say this cup is blue. Now you can agree with me that the cup is blue, right? The cup is blue, but there's many different kinds of blue here, right? And so I could be more intentional about that. I could have a very specific detail that I'm sharing here. So when we think about facts, they can be proven. We have some sort of proof, evidence that is indeed going to prove it to be true. It either is or it isn't. Now, if I say the sky is blue and you look outside and the sky is gray, obviously that was a false fact. That doesn't mean the sky can't be blue. It just means it isn't blue right now. So when we think about facts, they can be proven. So when we present information that's supported with logic and reasoning, ultimately we want to be able to prove it, right? Or we want to be able to disprove it if we're presenting fact as our support. Now we're going to talk a little bit more about support, but there's a lot of ways that you can support an argument, and it isn't always fact-based. Sometimes, right, we do have opinions that support arguments because we can talk about values as well. And so we'll talk about that here just for a moment. But before we do, okay, so Aristotle said that logos is fundamental to the development of an argument. Obviously, you have to be able to build an argument in a reasonable way that makes sense to your audience. It's logical. It makes sense that this is going to equal that. So it substantiates your claim. All right, so logos, we know logos is based on the word logic. It's the root word of logic. Okay, what about pathos? Lauren mentioned pathos. What is pathos? What is pathos?
It's an appeal to emotion. It's what we talked about earlier.
It is. It's an appeal to emotion. Okay. So when we think about creating, and I'm going to say it creates an emotional connection with your audience. It's not enough just to be reasonable. It's not enough just to have enough facts and statistics to back up your ideas. You have to appeal to their sense of compassion or their sense of joy or hope or perseverance. You have to inspire them. And the only way you can do that is to connect with them and at the heart, right? In a way that allows them to feel something. Now, remember, I said speakers should know what their intended emotion is. If you are creating anger, is anger a bad emotion to create when you are sharing a message with an audience? What do you think?
Most of the time.
Okay, I'm angry that we're not doing something to fight homelessness. I am so angry right now. We should be doing something. Is that bad?
It's going to probably shy more people away than it's going to bring to your argument.
You think? What if I said, I know you're angry. I'm angry too. What if I said, I know you're angry, but you can do something about it. I'm going to give you the knowledge. I'm going to give you the tools to make a difference.
If you use the anger correctly, then yeah, you can use it. But if not, then it's just a random emotion that's really going to get in the way of your speech.
Okay, good point. So can people be angry because you presented a one-sided argument? Okay, let's talk about the issue like gun control, for instance. Now, you know that there's a lot of people in Lake County who really, really are very adamant about their beliefs on gun control. I know that. I've taught enough classes here to know that there are certain people that are super passionate about that. There's also certain people who are like, wait a second, I wish we could make change or modify the Second Amendment laws so that maybe they don't allow certain types of guns to be purchased, right? Now, if I made people who oppose me angry talking about gun control, is that going to be a productive argument? I think this goes along with what Ethan was saying. So being mindful of that, right? We need to know where people stand. We need to know where they are with the issue before we create that kind of an emotion. So we want to be very cautious about that. We want to be very aware of what we're doing with emotion, but we need to have emotion in our argument because Aristotle held that if there isn't a call to emotion or an appeal that encourages the audience to feel something, they're not going to be impacted by your message. But anger can be powerful, it can be motivating, but it can also do the opposite, right? I've actually had a man get up and leave the room during a speech because a student wasn't really thinking about the audience as they could. And they frustrated them to the point where he got up and he left the room. And so it's really important to think about how you create those emotions when you're creating emotion. Now, how can we create emotion? What are some things that we can do to create an emotional connection with our audience? Any ideas? How can we create emotion?
Like facial expression, voice inflection, gestures, and be genuine.
Okay, an
Is like
expressive delivery.
in my opinion. Sorry.
No, you said an expressive delivery? Yes, for sure. So a dynamic and expressive delivery, and then being genuine. Being genuine is one way. So we can use our tone of sincerity, our tone of compassion, our tone, how we present the information. Now, if I said, I really care about homelessness, right? Obviously, I don't. And I've had students come up and they genuinely are terrified in front of their audience. And so their genuine emotion is going to be one that lacks sincerity, right? So you don't want that. So it's important that your appeal accompanies the tone that you want the audience to feel. So keep that in mind. So that's important to say, a genuine delivery. So being honest with your audience, but also being compassionate if you want them to feel compassion, being authoritative if you want them to see that you know what you're talking about, being convicted. And that's a way too that students can overcome some of that fear that they might be feeling. So they can feel convicted or authoritative. All right, so how we deliver the message is important. What about what we deliver? Are there ways that we can create an emotional bond with our audience? Is there things that we can incorporate in the message to create pathos? What do you think? What do you think?
We can try to relate to the audience by, especially if we know the group of people that we're talking to and their particular stance on an issue, we can give them like the benefit of the doubt by taking it and saying, you could almost start off by saying, I know this is what you guys believe. I know this is why you believe that. Let me tell you why I believe what I believe. Because if you start off like straight out of the gate, just saying that you disagree with something that you know the audience agrees with, it automatically puts like a filter and they don't want to listen to you. So if you start off opening up humbly and saying like, I understand this is what y'all believe, and then you explain to them why you believe what you believe, I feel like it makes them a lot more acceptive to what you're going to say.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. So you want to start from a place that you say, while I know we disagree on certain aspects of this, if you hear me out, I think you're going to understand where I'm coming from. Asking them, now this goes a lot more with logos than it does pathos, because it's asking them to hear your reasoning, but it does create that common connection. So finding the common ground between you and the audience is fundamental to being able to persuade them, especially when we're talking about topics that are more controversial in nature. So finding the areas of agreement and being aware of both sides of the argument. And also, once again, going back to values, remember, we want our audience to be seen as capable. Most of us come to our decisions based on maybe years of thought, right? So we don't just come to that lightly. We're not going to be adamant about our position unknowingly. Typically, we come to it because we really believe we've thought it through. Now, that doesn't mean we're always right. I've changed my mind in significant ways over the course of my life. So we can still be open to change, but it's important that you see your audience as capable. We'll go back to being responsible and self-controlled, right? We don't come to these decisions lightly. So when you see your audience as being capable and reasonable first, that's saying, while we don't agree, which we see a lot of this on social media right now, we're not seeing each other as capable, right? We're not seeing each other as responsible. We're automatically going to places that are unreasonable because we're creating hostile environments. So starting from a place that says, I respect my audience's differences. Now hear me out, give me a chance, and you'll hear where I'm coming from, is a good starting point. But I think what I'm looking at is more like, how do you create emotion in messages? And so I think Olivia said connected to something that everyone goes through or that they may have experienced. So stories, right? We can tell stories of experience and survival. We can find people who have lived through something or who are struggling with that, and we can identify with them. That's one way. You know, it's everybody has a story. And it's nice when we can be there for each other, when we hear that story and we feel compelled to want to help, or we feel compassion, or we feel empathy. And we don't have to experience that in order to feel that way, right? That's one thing that humans have. We have the ability to feel what others are going through without having to go through it ourselves. And so stories can make things very real for us. It helps connect us and unite us. Stories are important. So stories are a great way to create pathos and a message. We can, you know, we can use those struggles and we can relate to others and we can connect with one another's values. And so don't forget, values are important. And then making it personal, Lauren said, is something that we could do, something that we could experience, and creating that opportunity for concern and that possibility of hope, right? We think about that. Now, concern and hope, those are two values that I mentioned. When you can relate to those ideas, right, you feel inspired or compelled or motivated through that emotional bond that we create. Okay, so relate to the audience, create common ground, build upon their stories. And when you tell stories, I think that it can really help the audience to identify with the people who are impacted. All right, I'm going to move now to ethos, what I think is the most important, but what Aristotle would say is vital to a message's success. And I think I've heard a lot of this in what Lauren has said, and a lot of this in what you all have mentioned. Ethos is kind of shining through there. I think when we think sincerity and being genuine and being authentic and being compassionate, we're also thinking about the speaker and who that speaker is. What does the word ethos mean? What does the word ethos mean? Credibility. Yeah, appeal to ethics using credibility and authority, the credibility. And we're saying the speaker's credibility, right? It isn't just the sources, though the sources are important. If I don't know a whole lot about a topic, I can still teach you because I've done the research. So that doesn't mean that I can't build credibility based on the research I've conducted. When we think of credibility, though, it's the speaker. Is the speaker trustworthy? Is the speaker being honest with us? Can we believe what they're saying, and can we identify with what they're saying? What is their credibility? What is their authority? And that's why we say establish your credibility in the introduction, right? Tell the audience why you're the right person to share the message, because that's the starting point for what will be your ethos. And then you build upon that by the way you conduct your research, and the logos of your argument builds upon that. And of course, your commitment. And that when we say commitment, right, that also is important. We can say that I like to say the 3 C's of credibility. It's your confidence, it's your commitment, and it's your connection. Those all play a part in how the audience sees you. Are you trustworthy? Are you sincere? Are you being honest? Can they tell that? You can tell sometimes when someone's not being any of those things or all of those things. But you definitely want to be prepared, because sometimes a lack of preparation can impact your ethos. If you're not prepared and you're nervous, it's going to come across as you lack sincerity, or you just don't have the knowledge, and that impacts your message. So Aristotle would say that you need all of these elements: ethos, your credibility, logos, reasonable and logical message, and pathos, an emotional connection or an emotional bond with your audience in order to make the message matter and to be persuasive. All right, the last thing I want to talk about before I go back to that sign-in sheet and see where we're at is direct persuasion route. And that's going to be, how are you persuaded? How are you persuaded as an audience member? Are you persuaded directly, or are you persuaded indirectly? So when I think about the elaboration likelihood model, how likely is your audience going to be to make a decision based on thought? So we think direct persuasion route is central processing. So I can make that decision based on the facts that are presented, based on the knowledge that I've been given, based on my foreknowledge, What did I already come to this presentation with? Based on what this speaker has told me, I feel good about making that decision. I can commit to that. So if I was buying a new car, right? I come to that lot with some ideas of what I want. I want a car that has great gas mileage. I want a car that I can afford, right? I can afford the payments. I want a safe vehicle. That's all going to be important to me. Indirect or peripheral route is going to be that emotional appeal. How am I persuaded peripherally, right? Is that seller really, really persuasive? Like he's saying, you're gonna love this car, you're gonna feel great in it, it's gonna feel like $1 million. Go ahead, sit in it, feel the leather seats. Yes, it feels good, doesn't it? Now turn on the radio, doesn't that sound good? Can't you just imagine yourself driving down the road, wind blowing through your hair, you're listening to this great music, and man, this car feels like $1 million now. See, this car can go fast, right? He's not really talking about what's reliable about the car. He's not talking about the gas mileage. He's not even telling me that I can afford this vehicle. He's selling me on the pretty package. It's that indirect processing. And sometimes, right, our pathos can do that. It can sell an audience on a topic and then they leave going, wait, why did I want to do that again? Because you didn't give them enough of that direct opportunity or let them think on the message, and they're more developed and logical, and it appeals to their sense of, right, and we're going to go back to that responsible or self-controlled nature. So keep that in mind. The audience is going to be persuaded two ways. They're going to be persuaded directly and indirectly, just like you are, right? You bought that phone because you knew it would do the things you wanted it to do, but you probably also bought it because you liked how it looked or some of the other cool features it has, or maybe even how popular it is. So we're persuaded both ways, and that's important to consider when you're building your message. All right, I'm going to stop the share right now. I really want you guys to leave with the knowledge that it takes ethos, pathos, and logos to build a message. And when you go and you do that debate, I want you to think about how Jacobson and Brand challenged you to think about this topic. Now, don't worry, you don't have to know a lot about nuclear energy, because they're going to give you a lot of insight on that topic. You don't have to know a whole lot about renewables, because they're going to give you a lot of insight on that topic. What I want you to listen to, though, is how they develop their argument. And you can use the transcript to help. So keep that in mind. So when you go and you watch that debate, you can use the transcript to help. Now, kind of going back to, did anybody get a chance to sign up for the speech? Okay, so we got a few people who have signed up. And I want you guys to see that. I want you to go ahead and take that link with you. Okay, I want everyone to take that link. And if you can, before Wednesday, sign up for that speech spot. If you don't, I'm going to haunt you. I'm going to come back and say you didn't sign up for your speech spot, because the spots are going to fill up quickly. And what's going to happen is a lot of you are going to get stuck with a day you didn't want to speak on if you don't sign up. So by Wednesday, that's your last bit of homework this week. So you've got to complete the debate and you've got to complete the quiz by Sunday. But by Wednesday, I want you to sign up for a speech spot. You think you can handle that? What do you think? Okay. All right, just doing a pulse check. All right, I see some thumbs up. Any questions before we sign off today? Any questions for me? All right, I'm going to share that link one more time. Please take that link so you can sign up sooner than later, because I want you to get the spot you want. And then I will share this link with this video of today's conversation so you can go back and watch it if you missed something.